Steve Cassidy here. I want to talk this time about a new library in JavaScript, which is the Handlebars library, which is for templating of HTML code in JavaScript. And I'll be including that in my little project here, but we haven't used it yet. So let's have a look at the problem that we're trying to solve. I have my little Star Wars API project here, which uses the model class to get a number of films, get information about films, and then has this data changed handler, which gets called whenever the model data is available, and gets the films, and then for each film inserts a list item into the movies container inside the page. So I have the HTML code here for the movie, for the entry for the movie, which I'm sort of constructing out of the parts of the particular film, and that was then put into my HTML page here. So this works fine, but you can see already, and this is fairly simple HTML that we're adding to the page, that we've got this could get complicated and messy. And we had a principle writing Python code that we would only put HTML within the template, within the page template. We wouldn't have HTML being constructed in the Python code and sort of sent into the page. And that's a good principle because it means the design part of your work is just in the HTML page, and the logic, the controller logic, is in the Python code. And of course the database template, the database model is there in Python code as well. And so we can perhaps head towards that in JavaScript. We've done that in the model, in that we have this model class that produces the data, and we're using this date changed metric to fire that. So what can we do about trying to get rid of the HTML markup from the JavaScript code that we have here, so that we can have a little bit of a cleaner separation? Well, the answer comes in the, well, there are a number of libraries that could use to achieve this. One that I've chosen to highlight is this one called Handlebars. There are lots of others. Is actually based off one called Moustache, which is available. Moustache is available in multiple languages. Handlebars is a pure JavaScript version of this. And you can see from this little example here that it actually looks quite similar to the templates that we've used for Python in Bottle. And so you can see from this example here, I have a bit of HTML. Within the HTML, I have things in double braces. That's where the name Moustache and Handlebars comes from, because it looks like a handlebar moustache. I have things in double braces. And that's a variable here, title and body, and the values of those variables will be inserted into the page at that point. The difference obviously between this and what we're using in Python is that in this case the code is going to be called from JavaScript, and so these will be JavaScript data objects, and we're sort of rendering it all in the browser rather than on the server. So the work of actually producing the page is going on in the browser. But apart from that, it's similar. It also becomes different because in the case of the Python Bottle templates, we're actually running Python code in the template. So if we want a conditional or a for loop or something like that, it's actually a Python for loop. In the Handlebars case, it's a bit different. So this is what it looks like. Let's see how to actually make use of it in practice in an application. So what I want to do initially then is essentially just replace this line of code here with a use of a Handlebars template. So I'm going to take that code there, and essentially I want to insert it in here somewhere so that it will appear there. Now obviously it's not a string anymore. I'm going to make something up here and make it into essentially HTML. So I've got a few problems. I can insert it into the page here, but I need to be able to access it from my JavaScript code. I've got to be able to get the HTML template that I want to fill in. when we're doing it in Python, we sort of read a file and essentially put the HTML into that file. That uses that file as the template. But this is JavaScript, remember. We can't read files, or we could pull them from the server using an AJAX request, but we can't just access a file. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the index.html, the HTML page, to hold the template for a part of the page that I want to do. What I'm going to do is going to insert it into this point here inside this unordered list. So what I want is to add a template to the page. Now there are different ways to do this, but in HTML5 we actually now have a template element. So I'm going to make a template element with an ID of movie template. And what a template element is effectively, well, it's really just for exactly this purpose. When you view it in the page, in most browsers, most modern browsers, if you use some older ones, and I think it might have trouble with some versions of Internet Explorer, the template will be ignored. So you won't actually see what's inside it. It's as if it's hidden. If a browser did show it, would be able to hide it just using a bit of CSS. But basically it's an element that is intended for containing templates like this. So it's exactly for the purpose that we want it. So basically the thing in here is really just a fragment of HTML that we're going to pull and use in our code. So let's actually make it look like what we want it to look like. So I want to say episode, and then I want the value of the episode ID, and then I want a colon, and then I want the value of the title, and then I want the closed list item. Okay, so there is the HTML fragment that I want to actually use, and I'm going to arrange it so that this episode ID is the episode ID of the film that I'm looking at, and that title is the title of the film I'm looking at. So this little fragment of code is my template. Now go back to my index.js page, and what we want to do inside this loop now is we want to take that template and add the data for the particular movie in it. So the movie we want is Films I. That's going to be the particular movie that we're actually looking at, and we want to sort of render that into that little template. So the first thing to do is we need to get the template. So I'm going to make a new variable called template, and we need to get that, so that is inside this thing with an ID movie template. So I'm going to use jQuery like this, so that will be the movie template, that template element, and what I want to get is the HTML content of that element. So the things inside of that template is going to be this thing here. So template is then going to be exactly that little fragment of HTML, that little bit of stuff there, which is what I'm going to go and fill with my data. And then what I do is to inside the loop. So okay, sorry, that's not true. So what I need to do, this gives me the fragment of HTML, right? And what I actually need to do is to compile that template using the handlebars routine. So handlebars compile that template. So handlebars compile takes that bit of HTML text and compiles it into a template function. And now what I can say is template, and so li is my list item, is template, and then films I. So every time around the loop I use the thing that's returned by handlebars compile, which is going to be a function that I apply it to the ith film in my sequence. That gives me back some text in this list item, and then I'm going to append that into the container here. So if this works, then what we'll have is exactly as we had before. we'll have this sequence of episode and IDs. So let's go and have a look to see if that will actually work. I've saved all my code. Go back to my page. Here it is. And refresh, cross my fingers. Oh, and we've got an error. So we've got an error which says that I must pass a string or handlebars AST to handlebars.compile. You passed undefined. That's interesting. So the thing that I passed in there, $movietemplate.html, was undefined. So I can copy that, and indeed it is undefined. So I have my here my movie template. Okay, so the movie template itself, that seems to be okay. Oh no. Oh, it's because I can't spell it, right? You notice the problem? Movie template. Yeah. So movie template.html is the thing with an E in there. Movie template. Okay. So now we have movie template.html, which should be the HTML there that is going to be done. So let's have a look to see if this works. Cross your fingers, everyone. And there we go. We have our HTML elements being generated there, so you can see the source code of those as we go through. So there's a little example of using handlebars templates, but in fact I can go even further than that, because like the Python bottle templates, handlebars templates can handle collections of things. They can handle multiple things, not just one thing at a time. So I could actually write, and let's go and have a look at the documentation here. I can actually write essentially a for loop in the handlebars template. So let's have a look at these. So block expression, and so the examples here are here in block expressions, handlebars paths. Here's an example. Okay, so the example here is this each. So each comments. So comments here is a list of things, and then for inside that, that's essentially like a for loop over the comments. We've got the bits of the thing there. So we can reproduce that here. We can try and do that here. Instead of having just a template for the individual list items, I can have each films be like that, and so inside there, so I'm going to put UL there and UL there. So instead of having just a template for the list item, an individual list item, now I've got a template for all of the films. So for each film, I want to get the episode ID and the title. Now, this assumes that everything in the films list is an object, and that object has an episode ID and a title. And it assumes that films itself is, or the thing that we pass into the thing, has a property called films. We'll have to arrange for that to happen. Now, instead of an unordered list, I want this to be a div, because inside that div I'm going to stick this unordered list here. So there's a modified version of my template, which is actually going to generate all of the code for all of the films. And now I can simplify my code here in the JavaScript. Instead of iterating over all the films, now I get my template, and I can immediately get my HTML, and what I'm going to do is apply template to, and I want to apply it to films, right? That's what I want to say. Apply the template to films, but films is a list. The thing returned by getFilms is a list, and handlebars itself needs something that has a name, right? It needs something that's called that. So what I have to do is to call that, I essentially pass it an object, which if we were in Python that would be a dictionary, but in JavaScript this is an object. This is the object notation. So this is an object that has one property, and its name is films, and its value is this variable films, this thing that I've defined up here. And so I construct that, and then I'm going to, instead of appending, I'm going to say the HTML for that is this HTML code that I've generated. So that is going to sort of add in this HTML into the movies, which is now a div element in the page. So just to summarize, we are getting the films, which is a list of objects. We are creating our template by compiling the HTML code inside a movie template. We are then generating some HTML by applying the template to an object which has this property films, and then we're inserting that into the page. And that should get inserted at this point here. So fingers crossed everyone, let's see it works, and we'll refresh the page, and indeed we do have now our div, which is what we inserted with the unordered list of each of the episodes loaded in there. So there is a brief introduction to the Handlebars library for HTML templating inside JavaScript. It does allow us to simplify this code quite a bit. We now don't have any HTML inside the JavaScript code, which is good. The HTML design part is all done in the HTML page, and we can have these template engines, and we can have multiple of these within a page, right? You can have lots of these, they would have different IDs, and you just need to grab them in your code using this kind of structure and compile them into a template. All right, well, that's a brief introduction to Handlebars.